Good morning, Sir Dove. Good morning, everyone. We are the Group 1, and we will be reporting our topic, that is the meaning and functions of educational planning. This includes the meaning of educational planning and the uses of educational planning, which will be reported by yours truly. The components of the educational planning processes, which will be reported by Ma'am Nicole and Ma'am Jemima. The characteristics of educational planning, which will be reported by Ma'am Jenny and Ma'am Donafel. The school performance indicators by Ma'am Mimi and Sir Romeo. And centralized versus decentralized planning by Ma'am Christine. The meaning and functions of educational planning. Education is a fundamental human right and is indispensable for the achievement of sustainable development. That's why the Department of Education aims at empowering every Filipino child and commit to advance the educational goal. Thus, planning process does its crucial parts of identifying key priority areas of improvement. Educational planning is one of the vital components in attaining quality basic education for all. The meaning of educational planning. What is planning? To Adesina, he defines planning as a way of projecting our intentions. That is, a method of deciding what we want to accomplish. When we say projecting our intentions, this means that we estimate, we forecast the situation in the future. For example, when we are constructing a house or a building, we consult first to the individual who is responsible for overseeing the design, the production, and the specifications of the building, and that is the architect. If you want to have a quality and good house or building, you consult an architect for the plan. Same with us teachers. Before we teach our students, we make our lesson plans, which includes our objectives, which we expect that at the end of the lesson, it will be accomplished or achieved. That's why planning bridges the gap between where we are and where we want to be. Educational planning can be defined as the process of setting out in advance strategies, policies, procedures, or programs and standards through which an educational objective or set of objectives can be achieved. Educational planning is one of the vital components in attaining quality basic education for all, especially before we implement programs, projects, and activities related to education. We make sure it passed the rigorous planning processes, and it should also congruently agree on the measures and priorities based on their local situations to provide inclusive and equitable quality learning for all. Uses of educational planning. First is the identification of objectives and strategies. By this, we mean that educational planning helps in identifying and defining the objectives and the strategies, programs, procedures, policies, and standards which education needs to be more effective and efficient. The next one is the proper distribution of scarce resources. By scarce resources, we mean the limited resources which are available to satisfy our needs. And lastly, educational planning aids decision making. Educational planning helps decision makers at all levels to reach a better and well-informed decision.
Let's proceed to the components of educational planning process. The major considerations for educational planning in a country include educational status and the headcount, supply and demand of teachers, educational financing, school buildings, curriculum development, educational materials, expansion models, relevance to political, economic, social and cultural policies and objectives, and legal basis. These components are given greater considerations in conducting educational planning because by doing this, we are contributing in attaining the goals of a democratic society, social and economic concern with the welfare and progress of all citizens. I will discuss first the educational status and the head count. When we say educational status, it is an educational attainment or level of education of individuals. For example, our educational status nowadays, because of pandemic, Leonor Brioni said that there will be no face-to-face classes and sessions until we are assured of the safety of our children and teachers. Instead of physical classes, the Department of Education will implement distance or remote learning. This method delivers lessons through various ways, including online, television, radio, and printed materials. The another term for the head count is census. Head count is an instance of counting the number of people present. It helps the government decide how to distribute funds and assistance. Therefore, every realistic plan is based on a dependable census. When the figures from the head count were dependable, we could estimate with reasonable accuracy the number of classrooms, teachers needed, staff, chairs and tables, capital and current cost, among others. Next is supply and demand of teachers. It is a way of securing the future provision of teachers of desired qualities and in desired quantities to meet the resources available for employing them. The quality of education depends only on the quality of teachers trained. This is because they can only teach what they know, but I believe that a good teacher teaches from the heart to inspire the student, and the greatest asset of a school is the personality of the teacher. The next one is educational financing. Financing of education in the Philippines is mainly by the government or public and by households or private. Public sources come from the central, regional, and local authorities, while private sources come from students or non-governmental organizations and households. In educational financing, you should make your budget work for a school improvement plan while taking into consideration the following: the old badges, pupil numbers, exam results, pay scales of teachers and staff, and other resource requirements. There are three major financial functions in educational planning, which are separate and discrete in operations but are closely related: the budgeting, accounting, and auditing. Next is school buildings. School buildings should be adequately maintained because of their depreciation value, which, if not properly looked after, it could be hazardous to the existence of the users, that is, teachers and students. A school facility is much more than a passive container of the education process. Rather, it is an integral part of the conditions of learning. The school facilities can create a sense of safety, ownership, security, and personal touch depending on the quality and design of the structure. Curriculum development. Let's define first the curriculum. Curriculum is the lessons and academic content taught in a school or in a specific course or program. Curriculum development can be defined as a kind of step-by-step process used to create positive improvements in the courses offered in higher education. The world changes approaches and profiles, develop and new perspectives on research and professions influences the curricula. Therefore, the constant modification of the curriculum is necessary, since the curriculum should be relevant to the needs of the society, and the society is not static, it is dynamic. The next is educational materials. Also known as the TLM or teaching learning material, is defined as the resources that the teacher will use to help achieve the learning goal or objectives. Planning the materials and activities to provide and use will aid a school manager in organizing and monitoring student behavior and will allow a teacher to manage less and teach more. Technology plays a central role in this new normal. Digital technologies can shift the traditional role of teacher and student both within and outside the classroom. But technology is just a tool in terms of getting the pupils to work together and motivating them. The teacher is the most important. Expansion models. Educational expansion is the increase in enrollment rates and the extensiveness of the educational system which we belong to. Expansion models must be created from the beginning to bring into consideration what is envisaged in the primary, secondary, and senior secondary schools many years ahead, and to look for possible strengths and weaknesses they can borrow and avoid in the present one. The next is relevance to political, economic, social, and cultural policies and objectives. If educational plans are not closely geared towards political, economical, social, and cultural objectives, they will not take off and people will be educationally dissatisfied. What is the importance of policies in teaching or learning process? Educational policies are rules that are intended to help schools teach students efficiently, fairly, and safely as per the regulatory norms and the board to which the institution is affiliated. What is the importance of culture in education? Applying cultural values in education has a positive effect on several elements. It nurtures the sense of belonging, identity, and strengths, community participation. It also promotes appreciation and understanding of history and cultural heritage. Legal basis. Legal bases of education are provisions that gives limitations to both the teacher and students to avoid instances that may violate the rights of the two parties. Planning takes place under established laws. The legal framework for planning should be streamlined through legislation to include the form, structure, and functions of the planning units and agencies, the staffing and the responsibilities, the relationship of the units with other educational authorities. A knowledge of the legal system provides the foundation from which one can begin to understand and apply the principle of constitution, administrative, and judicial law to school settings. The courts have played an important role in the development of the educational system at both the federal and state levels.
Characteristics of educational planning. Number 1, choice of best alternative. Modern educational planning is a logical, systematic, and scientific process different from the elementary kinds of procedure utilized in the past of bringing about changes in the system of education. Change is always happening in our department because our government also wants us to follow the trend and knowledge that is applied in other countries. We also need to improve, especially in the field of teaching and learning. Number 2, teamwork. Modern educational planning emphasizes the only top administrator or the government should be involved in planning. Planning should be a responsibility of all people concerned with the desired change. A team of experts is responsible people, and those who are to implement the plan should determine the goals and appropriate ways of attaining them. Number 3, social and economic goals. Modern educational planning emphasizes that the goals of a democratic society should be social and economic concern with the welfare and progress of all citizens rather than the selfish goals of some special interest groups. The planning must take into account the welfare of the students for their further development. Number 4, cooperation. Modern educational planning emphasizes involvement of representatives of most of the concerned sectors of the society in the process of planning. Cooperative planning is considered an important principle of planning in all fields. And number 5, anticipation or prediction. Modern educational planning anticipates probable developments and needed change in future much ahead of time so that proper facilities, supporting media, and required resources to implementing the plan change may be secured. Thus, relevant changes and efforts are avoided and the changes are effectively implemented. Number 6, remedial measures. Another characteristic of modern education planning is that it is remedial and guidance-oriented. With appropriate planning procedures, it is possible to identify maladjustment or deficiencies in the system that causes educational problems. Remedial resources are one of the important part of planning because through this, we will know what is wrong and needs to be changed in the current education system. In number 7, the scientific changes. Changes made on a piecemeal basis to solve immediate problems. They create some kinds of problems in course of time. Hence, modern educational planning carefully and objectively collects data, interface analysis, and the relationship between present and future needs. It also interface analysis and relatedness of the various components of the social and educational system. Here, in scientific changes, analyze the possible problems of the latter to make it easier, useful for everyone when the day comes.
The school performance indicators. A key performance indicator is a type of performance measurement that helps you understand how your organization, department, or institution is performing and allows you to understand if you're headed in the right direction with your strategy. The first school performance indicator is student achievement. This metric looks at the number of awards granted to students during each academic calendar year. If you get this wrong, anxiety increases on your campus, students quickly lose their motivation, and teachers become frustrated. But if you get this right, it's celebrated on campus, throughout your community, across your boardroom, and you attain rock star status among your peers. Next is discipline referrals. If you get this wrong, your time and attention are lost on inappropriate student behavior, redirection, issuing consequences, and your teachers end up burnt out. But if you get this right, both your students and teachers become happy together because your campus is safer and teachers feel respected. The third one is attendance rates, determining the attendance of students that have achieved. Attendance during a given semester or academic year is a vital to track. If you get this wrong, your students simply don't show up in the classroom. They're not learning. The grades plummet. But if you get this right, then you at least have the chance to teach students because they are in the classroom. The fourth one is graduation rates. This determines the number of students who completed their schooling or received a particular certificate or degree within the normal time frame. If you get this wrong, your dropout rates increase. Students in your community are not prepared for post-secondary jobs and opportunities. Crime in your community increases, and your area's real estate values decrease. But if you get this right, students and parents see your campus as a place where students receive the skills they need for success in post-secondary education and, most importantly, their future career. The last is the teacher satisfaction. If you get this wrong, teacher retention rate decreases, and campus complaints prevail from the teacher's lunch to social media. But if you get this right, your teachers are excited about opportunities to help students succeed. They see possibilities rather than problems, and they're willing to go the extra miles to innovate and take instruction beyond the classroom.
Centralized versus decentralized planning. Centralization and decentralization are important concepts for the public to consider as they have significant effects on the running of schools and educating children as the nation's assets. Both concepts are related to decision makings and the holding of authorities in the management system. Centralization is a systematic and consistent concentration of authority at the central points. The important and key decisions are taken by the top management, and the other levels are into implementations as per the directions of top level. While decentralization is a systematic delegation of authority in an organization, means the extent of decisions being taken at the lower levels of an organization or a society. The concentration may also take the form of empowering school directors and teaching faculty to make decisions within a school. Centralization in education is usually referred to the condition in which the administrative authority for education is vested. The authority is not in the local community. Instead, it is held by the central body, which has complete power over all resources. For example, money or budgets, information, people, and also technology. In centralized education, all educational decisions and policies are all around uniform. Decentralization has been referred to the extent to which authority has been passed down to the individual schools at the bottom levels. Within this concept, the top provides local administrators with greater autonomy, which gives scope for creativity, resourcefulness, and personal enhancement, particularly in the area of problem solving. Decentralization of tasks does not necessarily mean a shift of power, because the local agents generally are only given the role of executing decisions that have previously been made at the central level.
Educational planning is the process of setting out in advance strategies, policies, procedures, programs, and standards through which an educational objective or set of objectives can be achieved. It is used in different institutions where different resources are used effectively and systematically as possible. It is used by an administrator while performing the role of a leader. Regardless of technology and development we have, still we are required to have educational planning. Educational planning becomes a necessity and planning competence becomes mandatory. It would bring a desirable change in the educational organizations for promoting the organizational health, the effectiveness, and functional efficiency. That's all, and thank you for listening.